Welcome to the video, guys. We're taking another look at the European Union and the unmitigated disaster that it has been during this coronavirus situation, with countless countries coming out against it for its incompetent handling of the situation and its inability to pass budgets and bailouts for these nations in a way that actually protects them and helps them out, rather than lumbering massive burdens on top of them, like we see in the case of Greece when they were bailed out. We had numerous reports yesterday suggesting different countries' sentiment towards the EU has changed and is now on a much more Eurosceptic footing, with also financial experts coming out and saying the EU is due to enter the worst recession it's ever known and could well be beyond saving, which is something we have suggested could happen since the Brexit vote, and especially after we left the European Union technically on the 31st of January. Well, the Express has picked up on this with a couple of articles, and we have a few other outlets reporting on the EU's economic crisis. But first we will look at Ireland, who, in this Express article which headline says, EU was no friend to Ireland. Sinn Féin leader lashes out at Brussels. Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald has launched a stinging attack on the European Union, accusing it of being no great friend to Ireland during the 2008 financial crisis, in a strong indication of growing Euroscepticism in her country. And she is likely saying that now because she knows after this coronavirus situation has occurred, the same or very similar is likely to happen again with the massive debt countries are going to have. Which is why I've said it's a good thing we are getting out of it, because we don't want to have to pay any of that back. Miss MacDonald, whose party won the highest share of first preference vote in February's general election, made her remarks in the Irish legislature today during a discussion, which was actually yesterday, about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. She said there can be no return to austerity in the wake of this emergency. The fiscal rules within the EU are currently suspended, but this is only a temporary state of affairs, and the excessive deficit rules will reapply again in the future, meaning Italy, Ireland, and the rest of them will likely end up in deep shit. Now, we don't need to continue reading through that, we can take a look at the next one, because it's not just in Ireland that Euroscepticism is growing. We also had the Express reporting yesterday on the French and their Euroscepticism, which is now apparently higher than in the UK. This was covered yesterday by the Rotten Politics channel, so I'll go over it briefly before we move on to what the financial experts are saying in relation to the EU recession and the fact that it might not be saved. Frexit rising, EU rocked as damning poll shows French Euroscepticism now higher than in the UK. French trust in the European Union has taken a dramatic nosedive, a pro-Brussels think tank has revealed. Around 6 out of 10 people in France questioned said they do not trust Brussels, the Jacques Delors Institute study indicated. The country's lack of trust in the EU has jumped to 58%, a dramatic rise of 10 points since Emmanuel Macron's election as president. Just 32% of participants said they could trust the EU, while the remaining 10% didn't express a judgment, because they likely just don't care. The findings place France ahead of the United Kingdom as the country with the least faith in the bloc's institution. On average, just 47% of participants from across the bloc said they couldn't trust the EU, while 43% do. The study was undertaken in November last year, but only made public today. So, if you factor in what's going on with the coronavirus now, and the poll I covered the other day that suggested 67% of Italians are not happy with the EU, we might well see an overwhelming majority who don't trust the EU, because we've already seen Ireland, France and Italy before now. I wonder who else there is that has not been reported on yet. Lead researcher Thierry Chopin said there was no reason to believe the EU's management in the coronavirus pandemic has done much to boost the bloc's support, and I would agree with that. In fact, it's probably sent it into the toilet. He said there has been a continuous decline since the day after the election of Emmanuel Macron until the point where ambivalents have not become the majority in France. The report describes ambivalent as Europeans who are neither supporters of Brussels nor Eurosceptic in their views. It claims ambivalents are driven towards Euroscepticism because of a lack of understanding about the EU's inner workings. No, if you let them know about the EU's inner workings, I'm pretty sure they will fly over to Euroscepticism fairly quickly. The media, schools, and politicians are blamed because only 48% of ambivalents are said to know how the EU works, and 64% consider Brussels institutions to be too distant. You want them to be as distant as possible and not in control of your laws if you can help it. If under exceptional circumstances, like the coronavirus crisis, the European leaders fail to display flawless unity and solidarity, then the ambivalents will be more and more tempted by the national withdrawal, convinced that the national state is the only one able to protect them. No, it's probably just a little bit better able to protect them than the European Union. The findings in France rank the country alongside the UK, which has since left the EU in January. Only 56% of Britons were said to have no trust in the EU, while 29% were said to be supporters of the bloc. Greece was the only country to display more Euroscepticism, with 62% of respondents expressing little faith in Brussels, which is obviously not good for the EU, and it continues here. EU done for. Hard-headed financial experts are beginning to think that the EU is beyond saving. It's been said before, of course, but this time it might be true. My bank, Coutts and Ambrose Evans Pritchard, and of course others too, are on the same page. Italy's economic health predicament heralds the breakup of the EU. In an article entitled Italy, a focus of discontent against the EU, written by Alan Higgins, Coutts' UK Chief Investment Officer, sent to Coutts' clients on the 5th of May. He argues that the impact of coronavirus has hit Italy the hardest within the EU, and that the continuing lockdown could be disastrous for its relatively fragile economy. Italy's debt to GDP ratio was already high at 136% when it went into the coronavirus crisis. The need to raise borrowing money to support the economy through lockdown could lead to unsustainable debt levels and the risk of a sovereign default. It is significant that the bank is putting itself on the record about the future of the EU. Banks' business depends upon the accuracy of their analysis, and to go so far as to acknowledge the real possibility of the collapse of the EU is putting the cards all in. Quoting a Dyer news agency poll conducted in mid-March, that 67% of Italians regarded EU membership as a disadvantage, which was actually something I covered. Higgins roundly declares all this adds up to a very real possibility that Italy will leave the EU, and with Italy gone, the Union will inevitably crumble. If this happens, new currencies would replace the euro. The UK and Switzerland would emerge as safe havens. The UK will begin to look like an increasingly attractive and low-cost place to operate. The export-dependent German economy would suffer as the new Deutschmark appreciated by 30 to 40% against other European currencies. We would expect Italy to regain competitiveness, so that there shows that actually for a lot of countries, the breakup of the EU would be good news, and especially for the UK and Switzerland, along with Italy, considering the current situation, obviously. And the conclusion, well, something of a break on the strum and drang of the rest of the article. The Northern Bloc in Europe, Germany and the Netherlands, will relent and eventually provide financial support for the EU, without the harsh conditions that come with the ESM. This is likely to diffuse the political stress in Italy and rumblings of discontent elsewhere, and put the EU back on track. If not, however, we could see a moment of truth for the EU and the euro. Higgins points out either the EU countries are in this together, or it could all come to a swift end, which is obviously what I've said, and should be common sense for anyone really. With that story there, backed up by this one here in the EU Observer. EU set for record recession, putting euro at risk. So not only is the bloc at risk and the euro from Euroscepticism, but it's also at risk from the record recession that is about to hit, or already hitting. The euro is heading for a historic economic recession on the back of the coronavirus pandemic, and a patchy rebound could put the single currency at risk. The eurozone is projected to contract by 7.75%, and the EU to be hit by a 7.5% this year, according to a forecast published by the Commission on Wednesday. It's now quite clear that the EU has entered the deepest economic recession in its history. Well, it's not really that old, so it's not really that great a deal, but hopefully it's good news and gets rid of this corrupt institution. Because when you factor this in with the Euroscepticism and, like I've said many times, the European Union's piss-poor response to the coronavirus situation in Italy and other countries, we could well not only see the end of the euro, but the end of the European Union as we know it. And a massive recession, as this article is talking about, could well bring that around. I'm not going to go through the rest of the article. The EU are not in a good condition right now, and only takes a few things to happen which are possible for it to completely crumble. Now before I go, I've started doing live streams and uploading gaming content on my second channel. If you would like to come and join me for a live stream to chat in real time, have an interest in gaming related content on YouTube, or just want to follow me over there because you are a legend, the link will be down in the video description below and as a pinned comment. I hope to see you all there. Now as always, before I go, I want to thank our PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar and YouTube members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors. Slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.